was fantastic. That was written, Renegade was written in 1978.
Who sings it?
Styx. I think it was released in 80 maybe.
I know you two. Tell them to come down. They're just upstairs in the team room. Hey, how's it going?
Everybody got idols?
Everybody's got sometimes we're aware of them and sometimes we're not. Yeah.
Brian's Abby, but man.
Pumpkins, my goodness.
Watch out what you say.
Yeah, I think Daniel must have brought him in.
Oh, why not?
Must be pumpkin time. We got pumpkins in the church.
Answer me this. Has anyone ever in your life helped you a line stealer?
Yes.
A what?
A line stealer?
Line stealer. Whose lines were you stealing?
He stole my life.
Yeah.
It was at a church retreat. Years and years ago.
Still holding you worth your work?
Yeah.
Wow.
Over the years.
We gotta talk about letting things go, Corey.
She calls me a line stealer, actually.
Yeah.
So I just call it.
Justin needs Terminator 2.
Sparkle shoes. Diamonds on the silver shoes. So, Mama? Oh, hello. Here, wait. Where are you going? You want to take these? Okay, you want to come back and get them?
July 10th.
Ruth was taking a nap over there.
Come on in. We're gonna get started here soon. All right. We're gonna give it just a minute longer for some more adults to show up. All right, 'cause I know it can be a tight squeeze to get here by 6:30. Hey. All right. There it is. So tonight we're going to start with our Wednesday evening together activity, and I'm going to encourage you guys. This is for some of you, this is going to be very easy. For others, it's going to be a little difficult. But you're going to have to find a group of 4 people. It can be one person that you're really comfortable with. So if you came with someone you're really comfortable with, stay with that person. And then 2 people that you don't know as well. And so I'm going to give you 3 minutes to create a group of 4. All right, 4 people in your group. Dawn, you can be with Nancy. That would be okay. But you also have to be with 2 other people. So there you go. So when you have a group of 4, someone in your group, or actually all 4 of you, raise your hand. When you have your group of 4, raise your hand. All right. So we've got a group of 4 over here. I'm going to give you that.
That's fine.
Have a group of 4 over here. A group of 4 here. Okay. Group of 4. This is kind of a group of 4. This is like a group of 3. We'll call it a group of 3 okay. There you go. You'll need that. As a person. Okay. Group of 4 here. And then a group of 4 here. All right. So what we're going to do this evening as a way of creating some fellowship and some knowledge of one another. I have a little Scattergories game kind of set up. Now, normally with Scattergories, you end up having to, fill out a whole list based on letters. We're not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to give you a topic, or actually someone's going to spin the wheel and pick a topic, and you guys are going to have to take 30 seconds to fill out a list of things that are that topic, okay? Make sense? You guys get how this works. I'm going to ask Madison to spin the wheel to pick our topic. And the topic is holidays, and you have 30 seconds to do as many as you can.
Christmas, Halloween, Veterans Day, Labor Day, Hanukkah,
Flag Day.
July, good one, Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve,
3, 2, 1. Time is up. All right, stop writing. John, no writing. You're done. Okay. Spelling is tough. That's actually the hardest thing for me. So, all right. Who here got at least 4 holidays? 5 holidays? 6 holidays? 7 holidays? 8 holidays? 9 holidays? 10, you guys are the only ones with 10 holidays? All right, I want everyone in that group to share what your favorite holiday is with everybody else. So Afton, go first. Okay, Christmas. Afton's favorite is Christmas. Yes, Addie. Also Christmas. Pam? Christmas. Lorinda? Thanksgiving. All right, so everything in the last quarter of the year. Gotcha. All right. Okay, we're going to do a second round, and I'm going to have a winner from that team spin the wheel. Okay. And the topic is sticky things. Sticky things. It's a great topic, and go. 30 seconds. Greg, there's a group of 3 you can join right there. Your pen's broke? There's another pen up here. Run quick, you've got 15 seconds. They're almost all brand new pens, so. 4, 3, 2, 1, and time is up. Okay, who got at least 4 sticky things? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. I think your group is the only group. Okay, so everybody share what your favorite sticky thing is. I don't know.
Maple syrup.
Maple syrup. Don's favorite sticky thing is maple syrup. Slime, okay.
I like marshmallow.
Hold on, I can't hear Nancy. Gummy bears. Gum. All right, there we go. Those are their 4 favorite sticky things. Someone from that team is going to go ahead and they're going to spin the wheel now. Okay, and the topic is pizza toppings. And if you get started before I switch it, you're okay. So, 3, 2, 1. Time is up. Okay, who got at least, we're going to start with 6. Anyone get 6? 7 toppings. 8 toppings. 9 toppings. 10 toppings. 11 toppings. 12 toppings. 13 toppings. Okay, so it's a tie between your two groups. They haven't gone yet. So what are your favorite pizza toppings for this group right here? Greg? Mushrooms? Hey, mushrooms are my favorite besides linguiça. So, Corey? Pepperoni? Jensen says pepperoni. Okay. Bacon. Oh, bacon. Okay, even better. There you go. Corey? Pepperoni. Boston? Bacon? Okay, Boston says bacon. All right, I'm going to let you guys spin. I think this is our last round here. So, you can just, yeah, there you go. And the topic is things you wear. Things you wear. I hope. Three, 2, 1. Time is up. Raise your hand if you got at least 6 articles that you wear. 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13, you guys, okay, all right. So we'll start with Lorinda and we'll work our way across to Pam. What is your favorite thing to wear?
Earring.
I figured as much. Okay, earrings. Afton? Of all the things you could wear. Shorts? That sounds about right. Addie? Shorts? Pam? Chapstick. Ooh, good answer. Good answer. All right. So we all got to know a little bit more about everybody tonight. If nobody in your group said the word underwear, I'm very concerned about your group. Okay, there you go. Well done. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the kids and the teens to their class upstairs. I'm going to encourage the adults to come sit on this side of the auditorium as we continue our class this evening. Well done, Maddie. Handwriting is a lost art, you know. And some of our handwriting looks more like stick art than other people's.
Oh no, my handwriting is awful for this because we were writing so quick.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Lorinda's going to be my mic runner this evening for the benefit of those who are online. Now I'm going to get myself situated here. I'm going to pass out a piece of paper. Actually, Lorinda's going to pass it out. Thank you, Lorinda.
I'm just your assistant.
My lovely assistant. Let's be precise there. All right. So we've been working through a series on how our relationships, our marital relationships, our relationships in home, can be of benefit to the world around us, but some of it begins with us sort of sorting out what happens internally. What happens in our homes spills out, spills over, and I've talked a couple times about getting back to some of this Relate Strong material from the seminar that we did a while back. And so tonight, I just kind of want to discuss how some of what we've discussed might relate to this material. And so we're going to do kind of a crash course on Relate Strong for those that weren't able to be there or just need a refresher. And so I want to start by kind of giving you this statement. Relate Strong kind of begins from the assumption that our core needs boil down to security and love, and that when we experience pain in life, when we experience distress or difficulty or conflict, oftentimes it's the result of feeling as though we're lacking security or love in some way, shape, or form. And so based on that, I want to ask you, you don't have to tell me the story of your last conflict, but I want you to think for just a minute here. You can maybe raise your hand and say which of these two the conflict arose from. When you last experienced conflict, which core need, love or security, was it about? Sometimes that can be a hard thing to think about. But Don, I feel like Don had an answer almost immediately in his head.
Yeah, I got one. Conflict over my love for Steeler football. Nancy went along with it.
Yeah, there you go. It was a love issue, right?
It was a love issue,
yeah. Okay. And Nancy was the peacemaker, right? That went along and met your core need of love, and then you felt secure in your
I felt very
relationship,
secure,
right?
yeah.
So there you go. Okay. Last time you had a conflict, which core need was it about? If you don't feel like volunteering that information, that's okay. But I want you to get it in your head. And then I want you to consider this. Would the person you were in conflict with see it as about the same need? If you were to stand back, think about the last conflict you had with somebody, and you're saying in your head, it was all about my need to feel loved or my need to feel secure. Would the person you were in conflict with feel that that conflict was about the same thing? And I think it's possible that sometimes we don't. Sometimes in our need to feel loved and another person's need to feel secure, we find tension and we find strain. And so a lot of times it's not so much that the other person doesn't love us, it's that they are experiencing a need for security, and so they're pursuing that in some way. Some people respond to affection by saying, I'm going to step back because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to be burned. I want to be secure. And so your need for love can't trump my need for security. Sometimes that's the case. The whole idea of the pain and peace cycle is that when we're experiencing pain, when we're experiencing something that isn't meeting our needs, we respond in a particular way. And I've given you a list of ways in which you might respond. If you take a look at the top, it says, when in conflict with someone, what do you typically feel? And there's a whole bunch of ways in which feeling unloved might manifest itself in you. It might literally be that you feel unloved. You might feel alone. You might feel vulnerable in some way, disconnected, unsettled. If you're feeling as though you're not secure, you might feel powerless or insignificant or hopeless even. And so when you have conflict with somebody, these are the sorts of things that you feel. And the question becomes, how do you respond to what you're feeling? And so I just want to encourage you for a minute. Some of you have done this exercise before, some of you haven't. I want you to think through, what are the things that usually cause you to experience conflict, to feel as though you're perhaps not safe or unloved? And then how do you respond to those things? And you can circle a couple of them, you can think through them, and we're just going to kind of get this language in our head for a moment here tonight. I'm realizing I should have put together a slide so that whoever's online can actually see all of these, but when in conflict with someone, what do you typically feel? Unloved, inadequate, powerless, vulnerable, unworthy, unacceptable, out of control, several others as well. Usually, when we feel these emotions around conflict, what ends up happening is that we think of the fight or flight response. When I feel like there's conflict around and I feel as though I am vulnerable, to protect myself from the vulnerability that I'm feeling, I'm going to fly, right? I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to make myself scarce. I'm going to avoid the situation. In a lot of ways, if you take this bottom list of things that you might experience and feel, you could boil a lot of them down to some kind of fight or flight response, but there's a lot of variation there. Sometimes you take the flight response to avoid. Sometimes flight can be a power dynamic thing. I'm going to make the decision about when we actually have this conflict with one another. And so I want you just to think through maybe the last conflict you had, maybe the same one that we just were imagining a moment ago, and I want you to kind of plot out that conflict. I want you to start with, when I had this conflict, I felt this way. There at the top of the circle. And I responded by doing whatever it is that you did. Thinking through this. So an example for me, when's the last conflict we had, Lauren? No, I'm trying to think of a good example from recent memory. I don't know. We've been graciously conflict-free for a couple of months now, which is probably a good thing. So, a conflict external to our relationship. I had a situation where someone had agreed to meet me at a particular time. We were going to have a difficult conversation that needed to happen, and they didn't show up. And I felt, as a result of that, as though I was devalued, and that my input into the situation that we were experiencing was not worth their time, that I was being avoided, perhaps. And when the other person is the one that initiates the conversation, invites the conversation, and they don't show up to resolve it, you can feel a certain way about that, right? And so I felt devalued. And as a result, I got angry. Now, I didn't express my anger to this person because that's not how I operate. Instead, I kind of bottled it up, and I was grumpy with everybody else around me for a couple of days until a friend of mine called me out on it and expressed to me that I seemed to be bottling up some sort of resentment or anger towards somebody, but he couldn't decipher who that person was. And so as a result of my response to the pain that I was feeling, I ended up causing others to feel frustration with me. And so we have this cycle that we can kind of talk about, right? That when I feel a particular way, I respond in this way, which causes others to respond in turn, right? If you look at the list of responses we can have to conflict, most of them are not things that inspire positive responses from the people around us. If you end up responding to conflict through manipulation of other people, or lecturing, which is a classic for me because the only tool I have is speaking. My children get more sermons than any other members of our congregation, and they're sometimes longer than the sermons I give on Sunday morning. Those are not the sorts of healthy responses that we can have to a conflict that we're experiencing. And so the question becomes, why do we respond to things the way that we do, right? What inside of us, what from our historical experiences as a human being, cause us to respond in the ways we do? And I can think over my own situation, my own upbringing, my own family background, friend dynamics I've had, situations where I felt inadequate and then had some sort of victory, how those things have informed the way that I respond to conflict. I can tell you this, part of my tendency to lecture is that I always want to have the right answer, because I had periods in my life where I wasn't entirely secure in my own intelligence, my own grasp of things. And I had people that had kind of given me cause to doubt my value intellectually. And so lecturing is a fantastic response to people who don't think you're very intelligent. I can pinpoint a specific time that was triggered in me for the first time. And I can walk myself back there, and because I'm aware of that, because I understand the first moment that I felt like I needed to give someone a lecture to prove that I was a valuable person, and understand why that became an effective tool in protecting myself and my core needs as a person. I want you to take just a moment and look at the things you have circled on your list. And you don't have to talk about this out loud, but I do want you to take a moment to ask yourself, where did this come from for me? Why am I? Why am I the way I am? Sometimes the scary thing about asking that question is that as you excavate, you discover things, oh yeah, I really am like that. And just take a moment and think through these things. There are some on here that are particularly terrifying realizations a person can have about themselves. There are other items on there that I think if we look at them and we contemplate them for a minute or two, they don't seem that bad, but if we were to think about the long-term ramifications of responding to every conflict in these ways, we might find ourselves a little more concerned about our patterns of behavior. So in putting together this material, I'm not trying to talk too much, but that's what I do. In putting together this material and thinking through what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, we have ways that each one of us responds to conflict. And we've talked about how conflict in many ways, I think, is part of this broken aspect of the world in which we live. Things that we were created for up there on the top, to rule over creation together, to be fruitful and multiply, to care for the garden and maintain it, to have oneness with other human beings. And then the reality is that someone is going to rule over somebody. That's the way that our world often works. There's difficulty in conception and conceiving and bearing children. There's no ability to have control over the ground that was going to yield to us and now doesn't. And then this question of, I want to be one, I desire my spouse, I desire the companionship of other human beings, but there's barriers in the way to that even. And I want to ask you, what of this list, especially that second list down there, how do you think those things impact our core needs? Things like feeling loved and feeling secure. Do you see a parallel to them at all? What makes us distrustful of other human beings ruling over us? I don't know anybody who fully trusts any politician. Now, they might like a politician more than another politician, but I don't know anybody that fully trusts a politician. What is it that makes us doubt the rule of another person? How does that impact maybe our sense of security? When someone else is in control, it means we're not, right? There is a desire for us, I think, most of us, to ensure our own security. And if we don't feel like the person above us is doing that, that can create some conflict. And of course, it gets magnified the less we trust the person that's in charge, right? That can be the case in our own home, not thinking on a national level, but in almost every situation we encounter in our own homes, someone is going to be making some kind of choice, and it's going to have some kind of impact on us. And if there's not trust between two people, that can create a sense of insecurity. What about this difficulty in multiplying and in being fruitful and multiplying?
Well, I can say something about
Yeah,
the
Nancy.
first one.
Yeah, go ahead, step back.
I think what's really difficult in some marriages is it doesn't matter how good your marriage is, at some point you are going to disagree on something. And so if you have not married somebody that will talk to you and help work it out,
Mm-hmm.
it's really terrible. And so I think that Dawn and I have done a pretty good job of that. We will talk it out and come to a decision. But there are times when you just totally disagree.
Yeah.
And at that point, I've got to go with what he says. That's not happened more than like a couple times that I can remember.
Yeah.
But it's still something that you have to submit to. And I know that in many marriages, there's just conflict all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really, really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if there's not clarity on who's going to ultimately make this decision, we want to make this decision together. We're going to have a conversation about it. We're going to try and balance the needs. And, we've talked before about the difference between compromise and, kind of the modern secular idea of compromise versus the reality of what compromise is intended to be, which is we're going to work for the good of both of us rather than I'm going to get my way this time, you're going to get your way next time, right?
Right. And I think that the few times that we have been in total disagreement, I would just say, okay, I understand that you would never do anything to harm our family. So, okay, we'll
Yeah.
do it that way.
Mhm.
But I just feel so many marriages just don't have that trust that the other person is doing it for not selfish reasons, but
Yeah.
for the family, the good of the family. So
the question becomes, how do we move past that, right? How do we reach a point of trust in the other person? And that's difficult because we all know no human being is fully trustworthy, right? And so it becomes a matter of experience. First of all, one of the best pieces of advice that you can have for anybody who's considering getting married is know who you're marrying before you marry them. That sounds really, on the surface, very easy to do, but there's also a lot of pitfalls that we don't encounter until we've been with someone long enough to experience some really difficult seasons of life. I had a professor, Brian Simmons, who always, encouraged us in his communications classes to have a long courtship and a short engagement. And, he'd do the hand motions, long courtship, short engagement. And his thought process, in many ways, for the long courtship aspect was that you want to see this person experience the kind of stress that you are likely to experience at some point in your marriage. If you haven't mourned together at some point, even small mourning, right? It might be difficult when you actually encounter something together to know how they're going to respond to a difficult period in life. If you haven't had the opportunity to celebrate a couple of big wins as a couple before you get married, you might not know how positive news impacts them, and do they become a really unbearable person when they're riding high on something. And so, that aspect of knowing who you're marrying is a pretty big way to not ensure security, right? You can't ever fully ensure that other people are going to respond in logical or practical or reasonable ways, but you can at least have some more assurance about that. So yeah. That second question up there, or the second point up there, is that a love or security issue? I will increase your difficulty in conception. being fruitful and multiplying? I kind of think it's both, to some extent or another. On the one hand, it is a question of intimacy, right? Expectations that we have with one another. Will I be valued as a partner if we can't conceive? In fact, if we were doing like case studies in the Old Testament, specifically the book of Genesis, we could look and see all of these women who are wrestling with infertility over the course of the over the course of the book of Genesis, who are deeply concerned about how that might impact their relationship with their husband, right? Look at the story of Leah and Rachel, and you just have this very clear image of one wife being quite certain that her husband could not possibly love her, given the fact that she can't bear children, right? Until she does. Yeah.
I just have to say, sometimes I watched a movie and it was like, it was the other way around. It's like, the guy was tricking, thank you, I appreciate it. It was the other way around. He was actually tricking the female into thinking that she couldn't conceive, but it was actually him who couldn't conceive and like produce,
Yeah.
the sperm and stuff, so
Yeah.
I just had to point that out. But I mean,
Yeah.
it could be both ways.
Fertility issues in either direction,
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yeah.
Throughout human history, not just in Scripture, but throughout human history, that has been an issue in relationships. And it's, I think, a matter of security, definitely. Hey, we want to have future generations. That's something that's desirable. In the case of Abraham and Sarah, right, that is goal number one. We want to ensure that the promise that God has made is going to be passed on to some offspring. But there's also the question of, if I can't produce offspring, how does that impact our relationship, right? A lot of people fix their hopes and dreams on having kids together and having future generations to succeed them. Will they love me if we can't have kids? What does that mean for our future as a couple? Am I secure in this relationship if we can't have offspring, right? For some people, that's the case. My brother and my sister-in-law, they knew from day one they didn't want to have kids, and so that was never an issue for them. But for a lot of people, it is. The third one up there, it will produce thorns and thistles for you. Security or love? I think this one's a little more obvious. Security. Okay, how so?
Because if you can't, grow your food like they were back then, like you won't survive. So that definitely impacts your security.
Yeah, so if we were to take it and kind of apply it to a modern standard, right? How often do we consider the career of another person before we start dating them, or their potential desire for a field that they're going to work in? Now, that doesn't mean it's the best choice, the best reason to choose someone one way or the other, but that is oftentimes a factor in whether or not we're going to marry somebody. Will they be able to support any family that we should have, or will they be able to support me? That's a question that arises, I think, a lot in conflict in marriages. And we talk about how money in general is a source of conflict. I think, when we extrapolate a couple thousand years forward here, and we ask that question, what is it that the whole thorns and thistles thing is actually about? The question becomes, are we going to have financial security? Are we going to be able to feed ourselves? Are we going to be able to take care of ourselves? If someone in your relationship loses a job, someone is no longer able to provide where they were before, that impacts the security of the relationship, right? So I think that's a security issue. Your desire will be for your husband, love or security. Which of our two core needs does that end up becoming a conflict about in some way? On the surface, it looks like a love issue, right? Hey, I love this person. Will he love me in return? My desire is for him, and I want to be loved, right? I think this is one of those that becomes a question of love for the one person and security for the other. Hey, I've got a rule. This is my role in this relationship. And so the one person wanting to be loved and the other person wanting to be, secure, that becomes a point of contention and conflict in the relationship. It doesn't mean that either of those core needs is less valuable, but it does mean that there's a kind of a disagreement. What is our relationship actually about? Is it about love for one another, or is it about security? Do I have to control the relationship for it to remain secure? Do I have to be the one that puts all the love into the relationship? And so those are things that we end up seeing, as I said before, played out in a lot of different relationships in the Old Testament. We see them play out in a handful of relationships in the New Testament too. And so I want to have a handful of case studies we could do this evening, but I want to ask you, when you think of conflicts in the Bible that might fall into love or security situations, what are some that spring to mind? Relationships with conflict springing from love or security issues.
No children.
Yeah, the no children aspect, in Genesis especially, right? But also when you think about Hannah and her desire to have children, it's a big conflict point in the Old Testament. Anyone else?
Jacob was in conflict constantly.
Yeah, actually, he's one of my core examples here in just a minute. But yeah, Jacob's in conflict with everybody all the time. What was the conflict between him and Esau all about? We'll talk about Jacob and Laban. Birthright, yeah. So security in a lot of ways, right? Birthright wasn't about whether or not your parents loved you. It was about who was going to be responsible for carrying forward the promise in this particular case. So this question of hey, am I going to receive the thing that makes me greater than my brother in some way? Definitely a security issue. Okay, anyone else?
All the patriarchs that had many wives or concubines, which I believe was wrong. I don't think God signed off on that. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But it all becomes love versus, or I guess it's, do they feel loved, and it's competition and who can have children, and they even name their children. It's like trash
about whether or not
talking.
they're
It's trash talking.
now I have one up on you. What a great name to give your child. Over and over again we see this, and it is almost always some sort of competition for affection in those cases, right? And of course, in that society especially, the affection of your spouse also meant security for you, but it was very much a love issue in several of these cases. I want to be loved by my husband, and if I can't provide children for him, I don't know that I am. What good am I to him if I can't provide him an heir? Okay. Other examples?
I think David and Michael
Yeah.
is kind of a really tragic example. It talks about how much she loved him at first, and she risked her life for him and all kinds of stuff like that. And then down the road, she ridiculed him, and I don't think that was security. I think she just lost her desire for him because he didn't do things the way her dad did.
Yeah.
He just didn't do things the way that Saul did. He didn't act like a king
Yeah.
the way that Saul acted like a king. And because that, I don't think she felt insecure, although the other wives may have done that. But down the road, she just didn't love him anymore.
This waning affection.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
her desire went away, and he said, "Okay, don't need you."
Yeah.
That's really tragic, because she was so deeply in love with him to start with.
Yeah. Okay. So in some of these, we've got classic fight or flight situations, right? We could think of Jacob and Esau as a flight situation. Jacob is more than happy to get out of the way and be as far away from his brother as he can. And finally, in the end, we actually see some resolution to the conflict in perhaps a positive sense. Now, I don't think Jacob knows it's going to be a positive resolution when he's going into it. He's hoping it will. But he actually confronts the situation and shows deference to his brother. And there's, that's that whole story. I spent most of last full semester writing a paper on that I'd love to share with you all, and you'd just be fascinated by all the insights that I gleaned from it. But I won't subject you to that tonight. Nancy.
I think too, Mary and Joseph. Joseph was hurt and thought she had been unfaithful to him.
Yeah.
And God had to intervene and say, "No, she wasn't. This is what's really happening." But he felt very unloved, and that she cheated on him. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be kind of a little bit of everything there, right? There's a public security issue. How am I going to be perceived out of this situation? So that's the divorce her quietly question, right? The hurt that he probably experienced as someone who was looking forward to this marriage, expecting a situation where the two of them loved one another and built a relationship off of that. And so a loss of that love and security both for him, which was then regained, of course, through the vision given to him by the angel. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to give you 3 examples, and I want to talk about them for just a little bit because we don't have a huge amount of time tonight. I've got 3 examples. I've got Jacob and Laban, which is actually fairly similar to Jacob and Esau, Mary and Martha, and then Cain and Abel, and we'll do them in the reverse of the order that I've put them up on the screen. When we talk about Cain and Abel, the question becomes, what kind of conflict was this? Was it a conflict about security or a conflict about love?
Cain wanted what Abel had.
Cain wanted what Abel had, which was what in this case?
Well, I'm pretty sure that he wanted his wife.
In this case, he wants God's approval, I think. So you've got this situation where Cain has offered to God what he thinks is an appropriate sacrifice, right? Abel has offered to God what God calls a good sacrifice and gives him approval. And this situation leads them out into a field, more or less. God has told Cain, if you do well, will you not be accepted? He disapproved of the sacrifice that Cain had offered, and he just tells him, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And then Cain kills his brother, right? I don't see what do you normally do when you're in conflict? I don't see take your brother out into a field and kill him as an option, as a response here. But that first question up there, how do you think Cain felt in this situation? First of all, do you think Abel even knew that they were in conflict with one another? I've always kind of wondered this, like, it's clear Abel did not know that his brother intended to kill him when they go out into the field together. Did he even know that they were in conflict with one another? Sometimes conflict is on one side, right? How easily resolved could all of this have been if Cain had said, hey, I'm really angry about this whole situation where God liked your sacrifice better than mine. Can we talk this out? Be a whole different story, right? How do you think he felt? What was Cain experiencing in the rejection that God had offered him? And then, of course, how does that play out?
Oh, jealousy and rage.
Yeah?
Then rage, I would think.
Yeah. So jealousy kind of escalating into the response of rage and anger, right? And then ultimately killing his brother. This kind of fits with what Jesus says, right? That if you are feeling anger in your heart toward your brother, you're essentially already a murderer, right? This feeling leading to action. So there's something that we can kind of dwell on there for a minute. But we can imagine how that scenario could have played out differently if instead of acting out of a sense of anger, of rage, of jealousy, he had responded by asking inwardly, what could I have done differently? What is it about my offering or about me that God is rejecting here, right? That's why I think, even though clearly there is conflict on Cain's part with his brother, it's actually a conflict between God and Cain. I think Cain feels as though he has been devalued in some way. And as a result, if there's only one person on the totem pole higher than himself, how do you elevate yourself? You get rid of the person above you, right? I think for Cain, this is a love issue. I don't know that it's a security issue. We don't see Cain experiencing insecurity in his being until after he has killed his brother. And then he suddenly becomes concerned that someone out there might do to him what he's done to his brother. He feels rejected by God. Heather.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think Cain knew when he was making his offering that it was not going to please God, or that it fell short in some way? Or do you think he honestly thought that this was like his best?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of those questions that the author of Genesis doesn't give us a good answer to. There's wording that suggests that what Abel is doing is inherently a more virtuous action because he's chosen the first of his flock, the best, right, and taken it to God. And then the language that's used to describe what Cain does is, and Cain also brought some of his produce. But it doesn't say that it was his best, right? So if Cain didn't know that it wasn't what God would hope for, there's at least an implication that he was not as concerned about bringing as significant a gift, right? That his offering was less considered, perhaps, than Abel's. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think with, like, when I think about if I do something that I intentionally know is not my best, versus if I have, slow. Like if I know if I do something and I feel like I've done my best, and then I'm told, no, that's not good enough, versus when I'm intentionally don't do my best, like there's a different reaction. It's still maybe embarrassment and shame, but it's a different level if you've honestly given your best.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, since we're not told what's going on in Cain's mind when he does it, the only thing we can kind of do is take some of the clues that are laid there that maybe it just wasn't as considered, right? I should be giving something. Here's what I have, I'll give it. But we can't really know for sure what was happening internally as he took it to God, other than God doesn't just reject the gift, he rejects the giver in this case as well, right? Like he showed no favor to Cain or his offering. And so there's something about Cain, his disposition, his activity, his internal thinking about it that seems to also be at fault. And so I think maybe Cain knows that it's not the best he could have done, right? Kind of like when you turn in a B paper and you could have taken an extra 2 hours and made it an A. Not that I've ever done that, but you know.
You know, when I read here, it's kind of interesting because it says, then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? So do you think God was giving him another chance to like go and do what was right?
Yeah. I think there's a redemptive quality to what God is saying, right? Like, hey, you know, this isn't the end of the line. You haven't screwed up in such a way that I can't make this right, or you can't make this right, right? So
And
that,
and the next line is, but if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it.
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like God's saying, okay, you kind of messed up, but you could make this right. And if you make this right, it will be okay.
Yeah.
But if you don't,
Yeah,
you know, you're gonna do something that you shouldn't do,
absolutely.
which he did.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, God gives Cain an out, right?
Yeah.
Hey, why are you downcast, right? Why are you angry? You could do differently than you've done before. Yeah, absolutely. Don?
There's a lot that we don't know in this story too.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say, that this was the first time that Cain ever got angry at Abel,
Yeah.
or whether it was a long-standing grudge between them. And it does not say whether he went and talked to Adam and said, Adam, I'm really upset about this, right?
Yeah.
I really want to kill my brother.
Mhm.
Or whether he went and talked to his mom.
Yeah.
Did he talk to Eve about it and say, you know, this is driving me crazy. I need help. I need help. I need
Yeah.
help. So there's a lot we don't know. But boy, when you see this kind of animosity,
Mhm.
a lot of times it didn't come from one event.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's other things that are, although I guess if you really felt that God's unhappy with me because of what my brother did,
Mhm.
but in our world, most of the time, we don't get help when we need help.
Yeah.
We let it fester and boil until it erupts. And maybe that's
Yeah.
what happened with Cain.
Nancy, do you mind reading, this is kind of an interesting little side note. When Eve bears Cain, can you read there's like 3 or 4 verses right around there. Would you mind reading those out loud for us?
Okay. Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. Later she gave birth to his brother Abel.
Yeah. Okay, so there's something about this that I think might connect to what we see with Cain. So when Cain is born, the Hebrew language is like poetic about his birth. At last, by the Lord's help, I have made a man, right? The Hebrew is actually, I have got, almost like grasped or created, brought this one into being. And it's this exclamation, this really excited and enthusiastic thing. And then also she had Abel, right? Which is a lesser sounding sort of thing. There's sort of this almost expectation that comes with the first one. And isn't it nice we have a second? Which anyone who is the second child can relate to that, right? There's always this excitement and all these pictures and fun play dates and things like you do with the first child. And by the time the second child rolls around, we're still excited we have you, but we're tired now because we had your older sibling. Cain was the celebrated first child, right? He's coming right on the heels of the proto-evangelion. You know, your offspring will crush the serpent's head. That's a pretty great thing to be expecting of some future descendant, right? And as a result, when Cain is born, she's very enthusiastic and also able. And so imagine being that firstborn and all of this expectation, this hope, this accolade. In fact, God's response to Cain and Abel kind of sets the precedent for God always choosing the second child over the course of the rest of Genesis. And if you're the firstborn, even if you are the firstborn in history, there's kind of this expectation that like everything I do should just go so smooth. Everyone should be so enamored with me because I'm the firstborn. And so God comes along and rejects his sacrifice and him, or just doesn't show favor to it. Maybe there's a sense of entitlement, right? It's hard to know. Like Heather was asking the question. Unfortunately, we can only speculate in some ways about what was happening. And sometimes we're going to have to read into it our own experiences and say, how would I have felt in this situation? Because it's supposed to reflect back on us so that we can reflect on ourselves, right? And understand our relationship to God. We only have 3 minutes left and we have 2 more case studies, and so we won't get to those tonight. But I want to encourage you, maybe go home, read the story of Mary and Martha. Mary is there at the feet of Jesus, listening to him teach. Martha is busy making household preparations and making sure that the food is going to be appropriate and cleaning the table, just busy about the work. And she's angry with Mary. She's angry enough to publicly call her out in front of Jesus and everybody there to express verbally her frustration with the situation. Maybe do a little dwelling on, is this a love or security issue? How does this whole pain and peace cycle play out? And because Jesus is there, we get to see the ultimate resolution to conflict in a lot of ways. I mean, if Jesus is the one that says, kind of in the wrong here, who are we to argue with him? And then the Jacob-Laban situation, like I said, a lot like Esau, in that Jacob feels as though he has acquired the things that he's acquired by righteous means, is entitled to run off with them, and Laban feels otherwise. And no matter where we fall on the agreement with Jacob or disagreement with Jacob, it's a conflict between two family members that sounds a lot like the conflict he's had before. And so the question becomes, did Jacob run away because of his security issues or his love issues? And how he responded to Laban, were those motivated by those same things? And then, if you want a fourth case study, spend some time thinking about your relationship with your significant other and ask yourself, the last time we had conflict, was it something that boiled down to security or love? And was it the same situation for them as it was for me? How did I respond? What was their response to my response? And next week we'll talk more about how relationships are mended in conflict, and we'll look at actually one of these situations, but not all three, because one of them is a perfect example and the other two not so much. So yeah, thank you all for your time tonight, and hope to see you next week. Well, or sooner than that, ideally.
Friday night, you bet.
One of my favorites.
It's not this weekend.
I'm okay with that. So you guys live here in New York? So we met in
Mount Wood, or Mount Angelo Sauces.
we spent 6 years here, 5 years.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. We could go early. We could. It's somewhat centrally located. We get a little food.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be. I don't need a cake or presents. Just get everybody together.
Or will be someday. Yeah. Slowly procuring requirements. Someday.
Right. If it's easier.
Yeah, feel free to take them, and I would have
Yeah. Or even if it's easier at the farm to just whatever, just do pizzas or something. Again, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Just getting everybody together.
Yeah, I don't know whether she would let the kids.
Norma, I got your envelope.
Oh, good. I figured I'd get busy and forget it.
There you go.
Good. I'll try to.
She is fine. She's got
Good. What time is it for you?
Yeah.
With three?
None of Mary's kids.
I mean, it's going well. I had a meeting with the big boss this week. She wanted to check in on
So
me.
I kept saying, you know, here's what the chunk is.
We were 45 minutes from
That
now
was
this
like,
morning.
teasing.
No.
She got the tooth today, so
Right.
that's one of the things.
Good. And the Steelers won.
Steelers won.
Steelers won. And down in the stadium, it was
Overcast. I saw it, blue sky. Yeah, Phil was there with his family. Went out on the field and I was going crazy.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
So you gotta get your time.
I'm kind of sad. Yeah. It's where I belong. Pittsburgh. There you go. My kind of place. And then go back every year. They should. They really should. A couple times a year.
Okay, so there we are outside Beaver Stadium.
Yeah. Yeah. Beaver Stadium was really cool. I heard they're gonna. I heard they're gonna put